Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us today. Welcome to our webinar. This is the second webinar in our series, Compliant by Design, and today we're talking about Identity and Access Management, or IAM, and FedRAMP, especially talking about Microsoft Entra. So that's a great tool that we use for that, and that's what we want to get into, how that can help with IAM and FedRAMP. My name is Maria Strassas. I'm the Director of Strategic Innovation at SMS. And SMS is a company that can handle all of your cloud infrastructure needs, both FedRAMP and non-FedRAMP. With me today is Reed Rising, who is the Director of Engineering at Stratus Cyber. And Stratus Cyber is a premier security company that can help you get settled with FedRAMP, CMMC, all those very complex types of compliances. So with that, Reed, let me hand it over to you to kick us off.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction, Maria. During this webinar, we'd like to discuss some key FedRAMP requirements surrounding identity and access management. And again, like Maria said, and how exactly Microsoft Entra fits into the picture. So first, we'll give a quick overview of FedRAMP compliance surrounding IAM. Then we'll briefly cover Entra and why it's our preferred solution. Then we'll dive into the specific benefits of Microsoft Entra, and we'll also discuss Entra in comparison to other IAM solutions.
Perfect.
So with the quick overview of FedRAMP compliance for IAM, first off, IAM stands for Identity and Access Management. Solutions like Microsoft Entra or AWS Identity Center are tools that manage user identities and provide users access to resources, such as cloud environments. Here we have a couple of FedRAMP control families listed.
Okay, what are control families? Let's start there.
Sure, yeah, that's a good question. So control families are essentially a group of requirements that have been defined by FedRAMP. There are around roughly 20 control families, and they cover an array of different topics. For example, there's a control family for physical protection. There's a control family for maintenance on your systems. Here we have a couple of control families listed: access control and identity and authentication. And these are the ones that are significant in that they relate to IAM, more so. So within the access control family, for example, we have AC2, which is the control number. And this is what defines how user accounts should be managed within FedRAMP. Additionally, AC5 and AC6, these dictate requirements for separation of duties and the principle of least privilege. These essentially require that users only have the level of access that they need, and it's limited to their work role. Furthermore, control IA2 on the right side surrounds multi-factor authentication. This is within the identity and authentication control family, and MFA or multi-factor authentication is something that we're actually going to dive in deeper shortly soon in this webinar. And these are just a few key examples of controls that relate to identity and access. There are many more controls within these two families and just many more controls in general across the whole baseline. But we wanted to highlight these because it shows how granular that they get.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so how Entra satisfies FedRAMP requirements. So why Entra? In a nutshell, Microsoft Entra Identity is our preferred solution because it's comprehensive and it has a number of benefits to organizations pursuing FedRAMP in that it streamlines satisfying those compliance requirements.
Okay. So given the high level superficial overview of those compliance requirements you just shared, plus now talking about, Entra does all this, what are those benefits specifically? What are we looking at?
Yeah, so the first key benefit we want to highlight is system integration. Microsoft Entra is able to integrate with other cloud providers such as AWS, and Google Cloud, which together with Azure, they make up the three most popular and utilized cloud platforms in the US. And so even if your system boundary or your organization does not live in Azure, but rather uses one of the other two cloud platforms, you can still leverage Microsoft Entra as your IAM solution. Similarly,
I was just going to say what is the benefit that, is that just a time savings, a money savings, a security savings? You don't have to worry about certain things from a security perspective?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, because those cloud providers do have their own identity and access solutions that are native to those platforms. But again, and this is actually something we'll touch on later on in this webinar, comparing Entra against some of the other identity solutions. There are reasons that we prefer Entra. It's easier for them to comply with certain requirements. They streamline certain operational, or they help operational efficiency as well. So those are things we'll highlight as well in this webinar.
Makes it easier overall.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Similarly, Entra can also integrate with your systems at the infrastructure level. For example, if you're leveraging Windows servers in your environment, you're likely using Active Directory. And if your organization lives within Azure, you're using Azure Active Directory. And the integration with Entra with Azure Active Directory is completely seamless. The identity is synchronized two-way. It's really great. The synchronization is really streamlined there. Further, even if your Active Directory lives on premises or within another cloud provider, you're still able to integrate those systems with Entra through a feature or tool called Entra Connect Sync.
Gotcha.
And yeah, the reason that we list this as a key benefit, system integration, is because this is important as it allows your organization to bring other components of your architecture, of your system boundary into compliance. So how you access those other components can now be integrated with Entra, and it can inherit those the configurations of Entra that helps satisfy the FedRAMP compliance requirements.
That makes a lot of sense. Anything to make it easier, given the complexity.
Exactly. The second key benefit is that the capabilities of Microsoft Entra Suite, like I said, they help satisfy specific FedRAMP controls. So this is something we want to dive into a bit deeper. Those controls include the ones we highlighted earlier. For example, FedRAMP requires that user access review is conducted on a regular basis. And so within the Entra Suite, there is a feature called Identity Governance. And you can configure it so that user access is only active for a period of time and then require approval for renewed access. So it's essentially a streamlined user access workflow and approval process with built-in notifications.
Well, that sounds like it would help both with compliance and with the actual security itself.
Yeah, it does, absolutely. And really, that's the core of FedRAMP, right? It's hardening your environment, all of your systems to make everything more secure. And just with something like identity governance and these access package workflows and approval processes that become automated, your organization no longer has to comply with that FedRAMP operational requirement, using spreadsheets or manually going through each of the user profiles to see when they last logged in. So.
Everything that runs on Excel these days, yeah.
Yeah. Additionally, with Entra Identity Governance, we're able to curate those access packages for users, allowing organizations to easily comply with the FedRAMP control requiring the separation of duties, which is something we mentioned earlier. So within an access package, you can define which groups and which resources a user has access to. Finally, Entra Privileged Identity Management, or PIM, allows you to comply with the principle of least privilege. For example, if I'm a cloud administrator, I probably don't need admin rights or privileges 24/7. Many of my tasks likely just require standard privileges. Well, with PIM, you can configure it so that my user account, your user account, on a day-to-day basis just has a standard set of privileges, non-privileged set of rights, and then only when required to do so, you can elevate your privileges temporarily through PIM. And you can also layer on like an approval process on top of that. The third key benefit of Entra, as it relates to FedRAMP compliance, is its capabilities surrounding multi-factor authentication. So Entra supports MFA configurations that are compliant with both the FedRAMP moderate and FedRAMP high baselines.
Oh, okay. And what are the different, is there a low, moderate, high? What do we look at with FedRAMP?
No, that's exactly right. So within FedRAMP, I can't remember how many total controls there are, 200 pushing 300 controls in total. But essentially within that, you have the FedRAMP low, moderate, and high baselines. The low baseline will cover a smaller portion of that total amount of controls, moderate more so. And then with the high baseline, you have to comply with really the entire set of controls, all roughly 300 of them.
Gotcha.
And so for FedRAMP High, when it comes to MFA, phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication must be used, which can be done by configuring Entra to use for example, a tool like a security key. Our preferred phishing-resistant MFA tool is YubiKey. You can see a photo of it here. It looks like a little USB token that you just plug in. And when you're prompted for MFA with this tool, you touch it with your finger. Additionally, FedRAMP High requires FIPS validated cryptography to use. And sorry, not just FedRAMP High, but FedRAMP in general requires FIPS validated encryption to be used. Okay. FIPS is a very high standard of encryption that's validated by the government. So the security keys, such as YubiKeys that you use, have to be FIPS validated. So, for example, YubiKey does have commercial YubiKeys that are non-FIPS. They use kind of your more standard encryption within the device. They also have FIPS validated keys, which meet that higher standard. And so Entra, this is how this relates to Entra, is that with Entra, you can actually configure exactly which products are allowed to be used with MFA. I can literally go to the YubiKey website and pull the product IDs of the different keys and just say, hey, Entra, I only want users to be able to use the FIPS ones, nothing else, which is great because that's, you can just easily prove that and show that to an auditor.
Yeah, and this sounds like, so this actually sounds just like it fits perfectly into the theme of our webinar in that, yes, it's IAM, but it's simplified, because the more you can just take things off a website, have Entra do it for you, the better.
Yeah, exactly. Anything that you can, any way you can satisfy these controls in a very technical, explicit manner is just way better because it's easier to prove to the auditor, and Entra, just more so than other tools, just allows you to do a lot of that.
Yeah.
Lastly, Entra not only supports using phishing-resistant MFA, but it also supports MFA that meets the AAL3 or Authenticator Assurance Level 3 standard. And again, this is another highly secure standard defined by the government. And to best explain this, for example, when I use my YubiKey, as I explained earlier, the MFA action would be typically just touching the YubiKey, which is touching it with my finger. That's one factor. That's something I have. For the AAL3 standard, you actually have to use your MFA device itself in 2 factors. So how this works with a YubiKey and with an Entra is, I plug in my YubiKey, I touch it, which is first factor, something I have. But then Entra will also prompt me for my YubiKey PIN, which I enter. And the PIN is something I know. And that makes up the 2 factors that I'm using that MFA device with. So that's another kind of high standard that Entra allows you to configure and require. Now let's talk about the benefit of Entra, Microsoft Entra, over other solutions, particularly AWS Identity Center and Okta for Government. First off, the reason we want to go with Entra over AWS Identity Center is because AWS Identity Center is natively only able to comply with FedRAMP moderate, not FedRAMP high, as it doesn't meet the AAL3 standard. So AWS Identity Center, it does allow you to use a phishing-resistant MFA tool. You can use the YubiKey, but you can only configure it to use that first factor, that touching the YubiKey. It won't prompt you for the PIN code as well. And I should say that AWS Identity Center, that limitation is just native. You can integrate, for example, Entra with Identity Center and allow you to comply with that high AAL3 standard.
Okay. But that sounds like additional work. So that takes away from the idea of simplification, or of trying to keep things, easy, simple, and, yep, not a burden.
Exactly. On the other side of things, we have Okta for Government. And this actually does meet a lot of those high compliance standards that we've talked about, the same ones that Entra does. We're also able to configure multi-factor authentication, with the AAL3 standard met. And Okta also has features within it that help streamline access reviews, similar to Entra. However, Entra is still our preferred solution in this case. For our organization or some organizations, it can be a more cost-effective solution to use Entra. And that's especially the case if your organization is invested in the Microsoft ecosystem already. Gotcha. So a clear example of this would be if you're using Microsoft Sentinel as your SIM, which means you're pulling in logs from your entire boundary, your environment. It's free to ingest logs into Sentinel from Entra. However, if I were to ingest logs from Okta into Microsoft Sentinel, there would be a cost for that.
Yeah, the devil is always in the details.
Yeah, definitely. So just some concluding thoughts. Entra, again, has a number of benefits that help meet your compliance needs for FedRAMP. And they also improve operational efficiency for your organization. Access reviews become streamlined and automated, and you can be safe knowing that Entra can help you meet those nuanced FedRAMP high requirements, especially surrounding multi-factor authentication. Additionally, Entra's ability to integrate with other systems allow your organization to bring those other components we talked about, your infrastructure access into compliance through Entra.
All right. Well, before we sign off, we did have a few questions come in, so I'd like to put those to you if I could, please. And the first is about PIV cards, which I believe are something that are commonly used by government contractors. So the question is, can I use a PIV card with Entra?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a PIV card is a personal identity verification card, and just as you said, those are essentially ID cards that are issued by the government. It's for government employees, for contractors, and they use that ID card to gain access to government buildings or online resources for the government. And the answer is, yeah, absolutely. You can use that with Entra as your MFA device. And going back to AAL3, PIV cards are another example of being able to meet that standard. You can use PIV cards in two factors, right? So you plug in your PIV card that proves that's something you have, and then it prompts you for the PIN, and that's something you know. So that's two factors.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. So the next question: what specific FedRAMP control does Entra not address natively that we would need to implement separately?
That's a great question. Yeah, something that Entra doesn't do natively is, and we didn't touch on this because, again, there are a lot of controls, but within the access control family, there is another control that requires organizations to disable inactive user accounts. And so if you have users who haven't logged in for 90 days, for example, then those user accounts should be disabled. Their access should be disabled. Within Entra, there's not a native way to just go in and click a button so that anytime a user reaches that threshold, they're automatically disabled. Unfortunately, that just Entra doesn't do that natively. But Strata Cyber and Cloud with SMS, we do have a customized solution that works with Entra to automatically disable user accounts. So we basically have our own workflow automation that can do that for you. So if you're interested, reach out to us and we can talk more about that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, to me, FedRAMP is so complex that's why you want a partner to kind of help you along that road and find those things, help you out with them as you go.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, Entra just doesn't allow you to comply with all of the controls right out of the box. There's still things that you have to do.
Better than other options, but still not everything. So, well, let me get to our third and final question here. So if AWS GovCloud is already FedRAMP High authorized, why wouldn't we just use AWS Identity Center instead? What does that relationship there look like?
Yeah, that's a good question, and also a common point of confusion that I find for organizations that are first pursuing FedRAMP and just getting their feet wet. So when you're using other services, other platform services or SaaS services, software as a service, they have to be FedRAMP authorized as well in order for you to use them within your FedRAMP boundary. So yes, Identity Center and AWS GovCloud, that is FedRAMP authorized to the high level. But there is a difference between being allowed to use it and whether it actually meets your compliance needs. The fact that it's FedRAMP authorized just means that AWS itself has gotten that service authorized in the same way your organization is trying to get your own system authorized. But you still have to make sure the configurations and whatnot of that tool meet the requirements that you need.
Okay, so it sounds like there's still more work to do, which is kind of the whole theme of this, trying to keep it simple, correct?
Absolutely. And again, like I said earlier, AWS Identity Center does, allows you to meet that FedRAMP moderate level, but just because of the nuance requirements of MFA at the high level, it's just not there yet natively.
Gotcha. All right. Well, Reed, thank you very much for bringing your expertise to this webinar today. We very much appreciate it. Thank you, everybody else, for joining us. We wanted to do this quick little dive into IAM and see how we can figure out a way to make it more simple. Though with FedRAMP, everything still has that, there's definitely still complexities involved. You just simplify different pieces of it. So what we will do, we also are releasing a video today that is a technical deep dive into setting up this IAM with Entra, how that works with also AWS Identity Center and so on. So we'll be emailing everybody a link to that video, and we'll also be posting it on our LinkedIn. So that way everybody can dive in a little bit more, see how these things actually work. If there's anybody else that that might be interested, please don't hesitate to share. Again, I'm Maria Strassas here with Reed Rising from Strata Cyber. Thank you very much, and we wish everybody a pleasant day.